Morning, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. This is the very first ANZ Keynote Camp that we've tried to run. It is something that the US team has done before, and Molly was a part of that. And I'll get her to just talk a little bit about that in just a second. Thank you for those of you who have done your introduction on Flipgrid. They were really fun to watch. We might just, though, since everyone's actually here in the room, just real quickly, just work from, I'm going to go from my left to right, but I know everyone sees this in a different order. But we'll just do a quick introduction, just say hi, where you are, what's your name, and what you're hoping to get out of today, perhaps. So we'll start over with Adam.
Sorry, what was that? I thought I was going to be last then, so yeah.
I don't know, on my screen you're on the left. So,
so what was the question again? Sorry.
Just introduce yourself, mate. Name and where you are and what you do.
Yeah, so my name's Adam Brooks. I'm from Rockingham in Western Australia. I work for Colby Catholic College, which is a Catholic school in Western Australia. Hope to get out of today. I really enjoy watching keynotes, and I enjoy kind of being out there and presenting. So it was kind of a natural fit that when this came available, it was a really great opportunity to learn more about how to write keynotes. So awesome. Lovely to meet you all.
Awesome. Thanks, mate. Alex, all the way from Canberra. You're muted. Alex, you need to unmute.
There we go.
There you go.
Hi, I'm Alex. I am in Canberra, and I'm muted myself now. I'm at Canberra Girls Grammar School, and I love presenting as well, like Adam, and I'm hoping to find my story, because I think stories are so important. And yeah, that's what I hope to get out of today and the course.
Excellent, thank you. Next on my list is Alfina.
Hi, I'm Alfina. I'm based in Sydney, and I work at Our Lady of the Assumption at North Stratford, which is only 4 years young. I'm one of the inaugural coordinators there, so I'm helping set a lot of policy, which is really exciting. I love watching keynotes. I feel very inspired by my late father-in-law, who last year presented at TEDx Canberra, and I'd love to one day take his keynote and do like a part 2 about where legacy's gone.
Awesome.
This is fantastic that I have an opportunity to do this.
Great, thanks, Alfina.
Yeah.
Mr. Lannon, Benjamin, and you'll need to unmute.
Hey, Chris. Hey, everybody. Good to see everybody again. Yeah, my name is Benjamin Lannon, and I'm a primary school teacher at Holy Spirit Community School. I'm also an e-learning leader there as well. I've been there about 5 years, so had a good stint. I'm actually on dad duty at the moment, so if I sort of whiz away for a bit, that's where I am.
That's right.
Yeah, to get out today, I guess you know, speaking is something that I've always really enjoyed, and I've always sort of looked to sort of push myself with that. And I guess the next level is sort of looking at you know, sort of designing a keynote. Hello. Yeah, so that's sort of the next level, and sort of hopefully sort of get something out of that today. So yeah, thanks for having us.
No, thank you for being here. Christine from Adelaide.
Hi, yes, I'm in Adelaide. I'm at Emmanuel Primary School, where I'm a digital learning leader. Title keeps changing. I head the IT department, but I also work with the teachers and the students, and a pedagogical leader there. And then I also teach out of Lamar University in Texas in the master's program. So that's a new one for me. So I'm looking forward to taking my speaking up a notch.
Fantastic. Thanks, Christine. Emily.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Emily McLean, currently in Melbourne. I've started working at Trinity Grammar School in Kew, and my role there is Deputy Head of the Junior School for Innovation and School Excellence. And so similarly to a number of you there, here, just looking about how to best tell our stories and share them out with the community.
Fantastic. Thanks, Em. I'm going to skip over to Christy up in Brisbane. That's the, I just realised I muted face.
Yes, Christy from Brisbane in Queensland. currently deputy principal and ICT coach in the state system that doesn't have Google. So I need to get better at speaking. I find it terrifying, but I think the more you do it, the more you practice, the better you can get at it. So I'm excited to be here. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thanks, Christy. Lorinda in, I assume, Melbourne.
Yes, here in sunny Melbourne today. I've just started a new role here as digital literacy coach at Wesley College. So 3,500 students, and there's about over 1,000 staff on the books that we're trying to get up to speed with a lot of different tools. And I really hope to get some confidence in crafting a great keynote, because I'm happy to present and I like to be up front, but I'm quite a procrastinator, and it's not always as structured and as well thought out as I would like it to be.
Great. Thanks, Lorinda. And finally, Nathan.
Hi, my name is Nathan. I'm from Tyndale Christian School. And one of my responsibilities to train the teachers. And I would like to improve in, that is one of my bottlenecks, public speaking. I thought of how to capture the audience as well as come out of the comfort zone, and just you can do it and get some tips and tricks in keynote presentation. That is one of my expectations here. Fantastic.
Good on you, Nathan. I see Shane's just joined the call. We'll get you in just a sec, Shane. But I'm just going to introduce Molly. For those that don't know Molly, and I'm pretty sure most of you guys have probably met Molly at some point. Molly Bennett, who is the Director of Summits for EdTechTeam, and has spoken a lot at a lot of events all around the world. And so Molly's a great resource for us all to have. Molly, I get you to introduce yourself and also maybe tell us a little bit about the Keynote Camp experience that you guys put together in the US. And a little bit about, why you did that and what the outcome was from it.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Molly Bennett. I potentially could have been Molly Schrader if I saw you as I did my tour down under. I'm currently in Minneapolis, Minnesota, up in the States. And so always super fun to be on and just kind of see how things are growing down in the Australia, New Zealand region. So yeah, we put together, obviously our EdTechTeam summits are full of real teachers, educators that are, practicing in the classroom or have practiced. And really what we want is an inspiring and empowering 2 days for the teachers that are attending summits. And so as we start thinking about the messages that kick off both of those days and or the closing Ignite sessions or keynotes that close them, we want real educators with real stories, and really all of us have those. And it's just sort of pulling out what is that one thing that you kind of keep thinking about, or what's that one thing that keeps you in education or passionate about inspiring and empowering others. And we just have tons of keynotes. And to be honest, it doesn't have to be the ISTE keynote of the year for it to be people's favorite keynote. So we decided that we really wanted to grow our list of keynote speakers, and we knew that a lot of people had great stories and were really interested in it, but it's sort of still daunting. And so we put together, I worked with a man up here in Minneapolis, Minnesota, that helped me kind of go through a 2-day experience in which I had this idea that I couldn't kind of let go of. And in a day and a half, I walked out with like 6 or 7 slides and a potential story for what then became my newest keynote, which is called Falling in Love with the Future. So I have quite a story as it goes, as it comes from like learning how to keynote through what's my current keynote now. And the process is part of the fun part. And so the opportunity to get to give that keynote a couple times and start learning who you are and what your voice is and what people remember about your story is really the fun part. So I'm not the funny one that's always up on the stage, but I have a lot of people that come up to me and say it was really relatable, and I was really like encouraged them that they could do it that day. And so you know, it's just fun to sort of learn what your story is going to be when you're up on stage. You don't have to be anybody else, but finding your message that you're really passionate about is the #1 important thing. So out of that keynote camp, we had a lot of people that started by doing their keynotes just as like a closing session or an Ignite session, and then have been able to watch those really grow into becoming, you know, opening keynotes for all of our summits, keynotes for other conferences, and just really growing sort of a personal brand strategy for that message that you have, which supports EdTechTeam Summits immensely, and just the story that we get to tell about inspiring and empowering teachers. So Chris asked me to just sort of introduce myself, say we're super excited to have you on the team. We can't wait to learn from you. Keynote Camp was really about being open and receptive to feedback from other people. So I hope that in this kind of online space that you can be vulnerable enough and then also be proactive enough to give responses. We met together for a day and a half, and literally it was like a camp experience. When we left, people were crying and hugging, and you know, we've got this great chat that still goes on that encourages people when they're going up and doing their keynote. So we hope it's a cohort too of people that are in this with you, and we'll sort of be there supporting and encouraging and providing feedback as well. So I'm going to share just a little bit in a video of just a little bit of some of my ideas around how I prep my keynotes now. It's not the only way by any means. So just take it for what that is and what I've learned from my story, but just excited to sort of follow along with you guys in Google Classroom. Sorry if I went too long, Chris.
Now I'm muted. Yeah, I have a separate mute button. So, thanks, Molly. That's fantastic. I see 2 more people have just joined us, so I'll just real quickly get them to say hi. So Shane, hi Shane, just unmute and say good day and tell us who you are.
Hi everyone, I'm Shane from a school up in Queensland, Bundaberg. I work in IT, so from the technical side more than teaching, but definitely enjoy working with teachers, students on how to integrate Google, those sorts of things. So that's where my specialty lies, I guess.
Good on you. Thanks, Shane. And a lot of you may not know Shane because he hasn't done a lot of work with us, but Shane is definitely the technical guru who we lean on for things like administration type work. And Phil. Hi, Phil.
Hello. Is that hello?
Yeah, you're on a bus.
Hi, sorry. Yeah, this is a bit dramatic. It's a real Australia story. Was heading to my mum's 60th in country town in New South Wales last night, and we unfortunately hit a kangaroo. So my car is a write-off, and now I'm on a V-Line bus in country Australia. So yeah, a bit stressed, but made the webinar. So just made it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how long it will last for.
I'm going to say this is definitely my first hangout with somebody that's hit a kangaroo. So that's a new
yeah. I will tell you. Very
yeah, I'm glad you're fun.
Yeah, thank you. It was
I do love
really
the fact that you started with a story, Phil.
Yeah, well, that's what I was thinking about. You know, we were meant to think about our story, and I thought, well, perfect. I think I may have my story, which may be a bit traumatic for people, but sorry. Anyway, yeah, I work on the morning.
Good stuff.
Girls from 5 to 12, and yeah, I'm the head of e-learning and VCA media teacher. So really working with all of those G Suite tools with our staff and students.
Fantastic. Thanks, mate. Thanks for joining in under such circumstances.
I hope it will. Yeah, I don't know how long it's going to cut in and out, but hopefully we can make it last.
Awesome. Good on you. Thanks. I'll just get you to mute while you're not talking. There, good on you. Thanks. And just finally, real quickly, you all know Kimberly. Kimberly, say hi. And
hi, everyone. I think there's only actually one person on this call I've never actually met in person. Phil, that is a pretty epic story. Thanks for joining us with that epic story. I think everybody knows that I work for EdTechTeam with Chris in Melbourne, and we are having a beautiful day today, all of us in Melbourne. And we're really excited to be working with you guys. One of the things when Chris and I have sort of been talking about and planning this with the expertise that our company in the US have sort of already put into this space, we have spent a bit of time, we were just talking about before we went live, going down the rabbit hole of watching talks on YouTube, because as you guys know, as soon as you start that, it's sometimes 3 hours later, you've stopped that. And I just thought I would point out, Lorinda, you talked about procrastination, and I actually watched a video yesterday about how really smart, really busy people procrastinate, and it's actually a good thing. So I will find that link and drop it in here, because I'm sure a lot of you will like that video just like I did. It reassures you. But one of the other things I wanted to say as well is that one of the reasons we wanted to do this is that, you know, we've worked with many of you guys over the years One of the things that definitely comes up is that the more we do this, the better everybody gets at it. And we want to help everybody get better at it. And there are a couple of people on this call in particular who I won't single out, but I know have been involved in numerous summits over the years, and they're just getting more and more confident as speakers, and they're getting more and more presence in the room, and that shows up in the evaluations for their sessions that they run. So something just to keep in mind is that we're not going to get it 100% right first time round, but we definitely all get better all the time. And I know Chris and I are constantly reflecting on our practice and trying to improve as well. So yeah, we're looking forward to doing that with you guys. And I will just quickly do a quick camera swap for someone else who's going to be a little bit involved in this as well.
Hi, everybody. My name's Jim Sill, and I'm just sneaking into this little spot. So I'm with EdTechTeam as well. I helped start some of the summits that we've been doing for years now, back in 2012. And it's so exciting to see this huge group of people growing this part of EdTechTeam here in Australia, New Zealand. So it's a real pleasure. I'll be talking to you guys through video in the next few weeks about just your stage presence, about how to own that stage, and then a little bit about the delivery of your keynote. So I'm excited to do that. It's really giving me an opportunity to be a little self-reflective, and also to be able to share with you guys. So enjoy the class, and we'll see you guys around.
Good on you. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Kimberly. Molly, I know can't stay with us the whole time. So Molly, you feel free to jump out whenever you need to jump out. But thank you so much for coming in and having a chat with us today. All right, guys, I am going to try and share a screen with some slides. That one, I hope you can see that. If you want to lock onto the slides, all you got to do is click the little window at the bottom, and it'll lock that in. Otherwise, people will come up as they talk. So why are we doing this? Well, in case you haven't figured out yet, we think you're all pretty special, and the reason you've been invited in here is because you know, obviously some of you have done some work with us before. We think you guys have tons of potential, and we just want to help develop that. And so we thought, you know, what better way than to try and give you some sort of guidance, help, encouragement to take that story that you've got inside you and help tell it. So you're a pretty elite group of people that have been invited to be part of this. We haven't certainly invited this to just anybody. So I hope you feel special. What we are hoping you'll do at the end of this is to come up with a final project. And I've shared the agenda. The agenda is actually in our classroom space. I'm assuming you've all joined the classroom space right now, but there is an agenda there in the stream, which has a list of what we're going to try and cover today. The end goal for you guys is by let me confirm the date for you. April the 6th. We want you to create a short video, 5 to 10 minutes, of you giving a talk. And you can post it on YouTube or put it in your private drive or however you want to do it. But we want you to post a video of you presenting an idea, a talk, a story based on some of the stuff you'll learn over the next couple of weeks. And so that's the goal. And of course, you know, you're in a safe space with lots of encouragement, and you can ask questions and get advice and all that sort of stuff. And our goal is to empower you guys to actually be speakers. And whether you want to speak at one of our summits, which is what we hope one day you'd like to do, or whether you just want to take these skills that you learn and use them, you know, in your own personal and private situations, that's great. But our goal is to develop you as a speaker. So I'm going to start with a quick classroom activity. And let me just launch it into the classroom space here. Here we go. Here's one I prepared earlier. So I am just launching that in. If you guys want to go over to the classroom and just refresh the screen or hit the little update button, you'll see there's an activity there called What I Hope to Gain for This. So I'm just going to give you a few minutes to work on this. So essentially, I want you to give some thought. I know we've kind of talked a little bit about it in our introductions, but what you actually want to learn from this. So like, what are the things that you feel personally that you really want to get out of learning to be a better speaker? Is it stage presence? Is it being able to tell a story? Is it developing the way you use your voice? You know, is it trying to take a bunch of ideas that you might have, that you kind of have this nebulous thing in your head that you think might make a good talk, but you're not quite sure how to pull it together? Is it structure? So whatever it is you feel is the thing you want to draw out of this, we'd love to hear about that. So there's a classroom activity there. You can click on there. It's called What I Hope to Gain from This. And I'll get you to just take a moment to do that. I'll make it an unmarked activity. There'll be no grades for this.
I have just dropped the code to the classroom in the chat for the Hangout in case anybody needed that again as well.
Thanks. Yeah, I was just thinking I put the code in the classroom, but it probably doesn't help there, does it? Actually, I think it's on the top of the agenda notes too, I think.
It's a bit hard to get the code, yeah, from the classroom if you're not in the classroom to get the code for the classroom.
Yeah, there is that.
Yeah.
I'll add all of my classroom homework when I get to a laptop.
Oh, yeah, right.
But I'll stay listening on for now.
No worries. Thanks, mate.
We're not going to do a heap of work as such in classroom, Phil, today, so you'll be totally fine. Just a couple of activities.
Thanks, Kim. This is totally not ideal.
And of course, as people enter some stuff into that activity, if you the ability to reply is turned on in that. It's a Google Classroom question, and I've left the ability to reply. So if you see anything in there that you think is something you'd like to comment on what someone else has said or build on it, please feel free to do that. Of course, you won't see that until you enter your own.
Hey, Chris, I don't seem to be able to reply to comments. I can make more comments, but is there a specific reply to a comment button?
Yeah, just underneath everyone's comment there should be a reply button.
Yeah, I've just got the add class comment, but not like a reply to a specific comment.
It's on the actual comment itself, Adam. If you hover your mouse over, so like I just replied to your comment. If you hover your mouse, I hovered my mouse over your comment, and then you'll see on the right-hand side there's like a reply arrow, and then it actually sort of tags. I don't know if it. Yeah, I don't know.
No. So when I hover over, I get the 3 dots, and all that has is delete.
Oh, you don't have the reply button. Okay.
But yours is haunted, Adam. You had that other thing as well.
Yeah. I don't know. Would that be set up at a school level, perhaps?
I'm not aware of it. I just.
But I'm through my. Yeah, because I noticed that with at school as well. Like I'm not able to reply, so that's just interesting.
Yeah, because it sets students can post and comment, and there's no setting as such for, you can't turn on and off reply. You can only turn it on and off comment, as far as I know.
The other thing I've just noticed myself, there's a little button. You might have to refresh the page, Adam, that says see classmates' answers, and that like pops out a whole window where you can reply a bit easier, maybe.
So whereabouts is that? Sorry.
So when you're on like the activity where like I can see your post, and there's a little like at the bottom of the post it says see, it's like a little picture of a guy's face, and it says see classmate answers.
Classmates will see your answer. Yeah. So I can see a little eye with the classmates will see your answer.
If you click on, Adam, click on the actual title of the task, so activity, what I hope to gain from this, and it'll, it actually takes you to a different screen where you'll see all the replies, they're displayed differently there. So if you click on the task itself, it opens the task rather than like editing it within the classroom stream.
Yeah, yeah. I can't see anyone's
comments. Yeah, right. I see what's happened. Yeah, Adam. Yeah, you've actually left a comment on the stream post rather than going into the activity. So actually click on the words activity, what I hope to gain from this.
Okay.
See when you hover over that, it becomes a link and you can go into it.
Yeah. So from there, I can't see anyone else's reply.
No, you won't until you've left your own.
Okay. Cool. All right. Give that a go.
Okay. No problem. See, all sorts of unintentional learnings taking place. Those are all great things that you've written. I'm just reading through them. It's interesting, so much commonality about stories, connection to the audience, and getting that structure. A lot of you have mentioned that. Brilliant. Thanks for that, guys. We won't dwell on that one. I just wanted to get that down because that may be something you want to go back and look at as time goes on and revisit that and see how far you've come. I'm going to hand over to Kimberly to run a little activity with you called The Danger of a Single Story. So, Kimberly, over to you.
So it's great to see so many people talking about stories and what they're going to talk about is one of the things you want to get out of this. I know when I was talking to Jim about this idea and talking to him about how Chris and I wanted him to share some insights into the presence on stage. Most of you have probably seen Jim keynote at some point, and there's arguably, I might be biased towards him, but he definitely is one of those speakers that has a presence on stage, and he sort of, the way he speaks and the way he holds himself, he commands you to pay attention to him. And when I said to him, hey, we want you to talk about that, he's like, oh, do I do that? And he said what he saw as his skill was telling a story. And he's like, none of that other stuff matters unless you've got your story right. He's like, you can be the most engaging speaker in the world, but people aren't going to remember you unless you've got your story right. So we wanted to start. Today's session is really all about content and structure, and pretty much everything you ever read about speaking, we'll talk about how the power of a story in that. So we thought it might be good, and some of you may have seen this previously, and some of you may not. So if you have seen it before, great, but we would encourage you to watch it again. We're going to start by having a little bit of a look at a video which is comes up constantly as people's favorite TED Talk, and it is called The Danger of a Single Story. It's about 19 minutes long, and we don't want to spend the full 19 minutes, and I think I watched it 4 times in a row last night trying to work out where to stop it, and I settled on at 9 minutes and 35 seconds. Exactly. Don't go to 9 minutes and 36 seconds. No, somewhere around there, about halfway through, I think you sort of capture the essence of her talk. So what we thought we would do, because we know that Australia's internet connection is not necessarily well renowned for being awesome, we thought we wouldn't try to actually play the video through the Hangout. Would actually get you guys to watch it independently. So we might. I'll drop the link quickly into.
So I've just done that, Kimberly. There's a new update in the stream.
It's in Classroom. Okay, cool.
It's in Classroom, yeah.
It's also now in the Hangout chat here.
Perfect.
So if you guys want to just make sure you're muted, and we will come back together in 10 minutes time. Feel free to jump and unmute yourself as soon as you've finished watching that. Yeah, her talk about the power of a story is pretty powerful. So we'll have about 10 minutes just to watch that video.
Hey, Google, set a timer for 10 minutes.
Okay, 10 minutes, starting now.
Okay, I'm assuming most people will be close to finishing that.
Yeah, that was my calculations was that was slightly over 10 minutes, but yeah, feel free to finish that off slightly if you haven't. Sorry, you're supposed to watch the 9 minutes and 36 seconds, so I hope everybody watched that last second. If you haven't seen that before, I'm sure you're kind of like, I actually don't want to stop watching that because she's such a captivating speaker, and the stories that she's telling are quite amazing. You know, we did an activity as a company based on this video late last year when we were talking about the power and the danger of a single story, and how you as an individual have stories about yourself that either can really position you in a really positive light in other people's eyes, or but can also put you into a space where they haven't served you as well. We know that one of our challenges is to, you know, craft stories and tell stories in a way that best capture what it is that you believe is really important to share with others. And so we're going to do a short activity. You're just going to type whatever whatever medium you like, this about yourself, and then we're going to get a few people to share. And rather than doing a single story about yourself, what we want you to do is have a think about if you had to tell your story of your life in 3 parts, and you had a minute per part. What are the 3 parts of your life that are the story that you would tell? And I'm not going to say anything more than that because I don't want to influence your thoughts around that. There are no rules. There is no right or wrong in this case. But we want you to just write down your story in 3 parts, and you have no more than a minute if you were to tell that each of those parts of your story. And we'll have about 5 minutes to do that. Google Home can set another timer for us, and then we'll come back and ask if anyone wants to share their story in 3 parts.
Does anyone have any questions?
Sorry, where are we supposed to be sharing this?
You're just writing it down, and
anyway,
then you can ask for a couple of people to share if they want to verbally at the end.
Okay, thank you.
And so is that the 3 parts in 1 minute, or each part 1 minute?
Each part 1 minute.
Cool.
I thought 3 parts in 1 minute might be a little bit challenging for teachers who all like to talk.
Yeah.
And we're back.
Gosh, 5 minutes when you're sitting in silence, it seems to take a long time, doesn't it? Silence is not my forte, that's for sure. So I hope everyone has had to think about it. It's a bit of a challenging task, I think, personally. Like, I just even tried to write my own out again. I just was like, okay, I don't remember what I did when we did this first time around. So I thought, what are like the three parts of my life that I think have really shaped me into who I am today. So I thought I would just start by sharing my story in three parts. And so it was actually, my first part is around my childhood, and it's inspired by, if you keep watching that video, she goes on to talk about how she read somewhere that so many of the great storytellers of our generation, they tell stories about, horrible experiences and things that happened to them when they were young, and how that shaped them into becoming the person they are today. And she talks about how she sometimes used to try and dream up horrible things that her parents had done to her just so she could become a better storyteller. And I totally relate to that, because my childhood was like a very typical, like, excellent childhood. It was always fun. It was filled with people. I have siblings. I have cousins around me the whole time. My mum is an excellent cook and an outstanding baker, and consequently every single person that I went to school with wanted to come to our house, because my mum always had cakes and biscuits and slices around. And so that childhood of people and fun and interaction and food definitely shaped me. The next part of my story, I think, it's funny, I jump all the way forward to being a teacher when I think about the things that have really influenced my life. Like many of you, I totally was completely overwhelmed when I first became a teacher. I was like, holy crap, I totally accidentally became a teacher, but that's a whole nother story. I actually didn't mean to apply to become a secondary teacher. I did that by accident because I stuffed up my enrollment form, but that's a whole nother story. But after a little while of being a teacher, I realized that I'd found my calling. That I just loved it, and every single day I would be laughing and crying. I was challenged by my kids, but I'd never been more exhausted in my life. And I don't. There's not time to talk about it, but when you think about the things that really have had those huge impacts on you as a teacher, you think about those individual kids that you're connected with and you've shared moments with, and that they've come back to you and said things. And, I actually was at Aldi the other day, and I ran into an ex-student and what's actually the sister of one of the boys I taught many, many years ago. And she was at the checkout, and I walked up and I was like, oh my gosh, hi. And I said, oh, how's Jesse going? Blah, blah, blah. And she's like, oh, and she started telling me all these things about him. And, I reflect on the kid that he was and the kid that he's become. And those are the moments that, as a teacher, you go, wow, this is what makes all those late nights of reading horrible essays worth it. And then my final part of my life, I think my single story is probably becoming a mother. And that anybody who is a parent on this call will definitely know how kids change things. And so, yeah, I have a 19-month-old, and I'm also expecting a baby boy in August. So I'm about to be a mother of 2, which is like genuinely terrifying, but that's a whole nother thing. But one of the things around my life story as a mother is that I work full-time as well. And I think I took off maybe like 2 weeks when I had a baby. And so I didn't really stop working. And that's been really, really good and really, really challenging. But one of the things I really noticed is that as soon as you become a parent, and you're particularly, I think, probably mothers, and you also are in a professional space, you constantly have these people, not necessarily explicitly on purpose, but people constantly question, like, can you do it all? Like, and how committed are you to your profession, because they know you're so committed to your children. And that's been a whole new experience for me, of that balance and working out where that fits with me, and also trying to challenge some of those spaces and those beliefs that people hold. So that's my life story in 3 parts. I should have got you to time me, Chris. Chris, did you time me by any chance?
I thought about it after you started, so I just let you go.
Thanks. Yeah, you probably should always time me and cut me off, because, my concept of 3 minutes may not be actually 3 minutes. So I thought I would just open it up. I thought I would just do a bit of an example. Mine is not the perfect story in 3 parts, but it was just those are the 3 things when I literally sat down right then and I grabbed a pen and I thought, what are my 3 parts of my story right now that I was going to tell? And that's what sprung to mind. So would anybody like to, and thank you for all the congratulations in the chat to everybody. Would anybody like to share their story in 3 parts? And we might run a bit of a timer. We won't hunt. It's not like a demo slam where you're going to get kicked off the stage, but we might try to keep them roughly to 3 minutes. Does anybody like to share theirs? Christine, great. You want to go first? Oh, Christy, you're going to share too? We'll start with Christine and then we'll go to you, Christy. I think that's what you were saying, Christine. All right, Christine, take it away.
Okay. Well, I was born in LA, one of 3 children in a small house in a big city, and soon to become a family shattered by first an earthquake that separated my room from my house, and then a greater personal earthquake when my parents got divorced and my mom was left with 3 children, no job and no education. And as a young woman, I was driven and fiercely independent, not wanting to be left in the same situation. And so soon with a business degree, then big roles in management consulting, and in the fast-paced world of consulting and technology in the San Francisco Bay Area in the 90s. And I traveled 80% of my time with no roots and no stability. So the 3rd chapter, I started my own family, determined to keep it together, and at the same time creating even further separation from my birth family, moving 8,000 kilometers away to Australia. And in this chapter, roles of wife, mother, educator, and Christian leader have shaped my identity. And as my children begin to leave the nest now, I've had new opportunities, including completing my doctorate in global educational leadership. And I'm excited about the next chapter where I'm uniquely equipped to have an impact where my 2 worlds of technology and education have come together.
That's great, Christine. And it's so interesting because listening to your story, like, I don't know, how many years have I known you for now? 3 years or something like that. And there's so many elements of the story that you just shared there that I have no idea about, that I was like, oh, I want you to tell me more about that story and like how that's shaped things and, made you into the person you are today. So awesome. Thank you for sharing. Christy, do you want to share yours now?
Sure. So mine's a little bit similar to yours, Kimberly. I thought of, excuse me, past, present, and the future. So my childhood, I grew up in a traditional family where the males had a role and the females had a role. So now in the present, I'm very strongly opposed to that type of role in the family. So I'm independent. I've become a mother now. I'm a researcher, I'm a professional, and in the future, I want to continue innovating and continue breaking that mold of what I grew up in the roles of females and males, and being a mother and having my own family now, I feel like everything that I'm doing today is for innovation for today's children, for my children, and trying to make this a great place for today's kids. That's it.
Awesome. And I love how, you and Christine actually, I know you guys have probably never met, but you actually have a lot of similar professional experiences, I think. But your stories are so different. I think that's what this captures. Who else would like to share? All right, Adam.
Hi. First of all, congratulations, kids. I'll just share a little bit about my story. I grew up throughout my schooling being upper year, and so there was a strong sense of, I guess, not responsibility, but a lot of people actually put a lot of pressure on me to be that person who was upper year and what that actually meant. So you're the smart one, or you're the geek, and this became my one story, and it really made me quite an anxious person growing up. Kind of throughout my schooling, I didn't really have to try, and it wasn't until about year 10 or year 11 where subjects started getting a little bit harder, and I didn't actually know how to go about studying. So I managed to scrape into university, and I started my Japanese studies, and it was an amazing experience, but I still didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And I was one of those kids that was told I could be anything and do anything, and that actually made it quite difficult. So I tried a bit of everything, a bit of maths, a bit of statistics, a bit of screen studies, a bit of psychology, and I still couldn't really find out what it is that I wanted to do. And part of that was kind of struggling with perfectionism, and I kind of almost got this sense of analysis paralysis. And because I had no ambition, it was really hard for me to go through uni not knowing how to study. And I ended up failing so many units, I actually got kicked out of university. And this was such a shame for me, because I was the first person in my family to actually to make it through to university. And so for about 6 months in my life, I couldn't bear the thought of telling my parents that this was what I was actually going through. So it was very, very hard on me. Anyway, kind of moving forward from that, I actually went on into the technologies field and spent 7 years in the software industry, but knew that I wanted to become a teacher, and so this becoming a teacher was the third stage of my life here, and so one of the big things that I really feel about being a teacher is I think sometimes we actually set students up for this failure, and we need to let students fail lightly. And I think sometimes schooling doesn't allow for that. And I'm very hopeful for the future of education with very hopeful for the future of education in some of this project-based learning and challenge-based learning, and actually letting students fail lightly. Nearly got there.
Yeah, well, you've pretty impressive timing, really. Thank you for sharing that, Adam. That was it's so interesting, and as you're talking at the start, I was like, gosh, you're like the perfect example of the growth mindset that people talk about all the time, isn't it? And the way we should talk to kids about, you know, what they're capable of doing, not just telling them that they are capable of doing everything, that they're, you know, that they're adaptable and they're flexible. So, all right, Alex, let's go to you.
Okay, thanks. I've structured mine under the theme of growth. I've thought three elements of growth in my life. The first part is growing up as a child. I grew up in Hong Kong in the 70s and 80s, and it was a very colonial place then, but very, very international, as it still is. And the British International School that I went to was really liberal, very progressive, and I really was taught how to think for myself. School and living there gave me a sense of being a world citizen, even before it was a funky term. And I remember boasting at one stage of having friends from every continent on Earth, which was pretty cool. My second phase is growing independence and relationships. So I moved from living in this very cosmopolitan place to living on campus at Sydney Uni in a pretty parochial college, which was great, surrounded by country people. So it was a whole new world for me, who were constantly asking why I spoke in such a posh way. But it was here that I not only developed independence, but developed relationships and saw the power of relationships. And that continued when I started teaching too, that power of relationship with students and with your colleagues. And then my third part is growing others. So I enjoy developing students, but I've also for the past decade really enjoyed working with teachers and developing them professionally. And then, of course, you know, developing my own children who are now teenagers. The time goes so quickly, Kimberly, and congratulations, by the way. And there is room for more growth in all areas of my life as I move forward. And this is part of it. So thanks.
Thank you. It's interesting because, Alex, I've always wondered where your accent came from.
Oh, there you go.
you definitely still have that British influence very strong in your language. So that's right. All right, awesome. Let's hear from Alfina, and then Nick, we might just get you after Alfina. You missed the intro at the start, so you can intro yourself / tell us a little bit of your story maybe after Alfina.
All right. So mine was based a bit around personal struggle, and So starting off, growing up, I changed school, started year 3 at a new school, and I come from a very, very traditional Italian family, which poses its own struggles in itself. But once I changed schools, I was bullied quite a bit, being very different to the community that I had come into. And my parents had a motto, don't stand out, don't be different. So when I came home, complained of being bullying, they're like, oh no, it's all your own fault, you're standing out. And the bullying actually didn't stop until I went to year 7, and my new friends I'd made in year 7 at my new school went to the coordinator and said, hey, enough's enough. And they actually put a stop to it. And they started that I actually value my friends quite a lot because they're the ones that stood up for me. But it created already a lot of emotional scars. And on top of that, that's when my hearing impairment was discovered. And my parents were like, nope, you're going to stand out if you wear hearing aids. You can't, don't wear them. You can't have them. So I struggled a lot. And it wasn't until I got my hearing aids that actually my ability to do English, the school actually was very surprised. I was very poor in English, as in the English subject. And I finished my year 12 with extension English too. But my grade just went up once my parents accepted the fact that, hey, she needs something to help her learn. So I then went on to the second part about being a teacher, and I discovered that I want to be a teacher when I was in year 6, and I actually had a netball injury and couldn't walk the kilometre up the road to the nearest, where we used to go to do sport at St. George Oval, where the Saints play. And then so I had to stay with kindergarten. I really loved that I was helping kindergarten when I was in year 6, and their faces lit up. So that's what made me discover I want to be a teacher. And so I found that knowledge was power. If I knew my content well, I can rattle off, and I was able to be part of that. So I studied really hard. And going on to the third part of my story was that that idea of knowledge. If I knew my content, if I knew what I was doing, that confidence was there. But the moment I was in situations that I was unfamiliar, I just turned into a person in the corner who couldn't participate. So trying to overcome that personal struggle of anxiety, meeting my husband, so he pushed me to go see somebody, and I had the diagnosis of having social phobia and anxiety. And that's when I first started going into workshops and presenting at workshops. That was my way of saying, hey, I need to get over this. So trying to sell myself is something I don't really do well. It took me 8 years to receive permanency in my job. But now I'm recognised as an educator. And so going through the whole personal struggle and never giving up, becoming knowledgeable, reading books, becoming knowledgeable is what helped me overcome that journey. And I know I'm still going through it, but that's my story.
Thanks for sharing, Althena. And it's so interesting for me to hear that, because I feel like I've known you now for a number of years, and you are brilliant in front of a room full of people. It is so interesting to know all of the struggles that have got you to that place as well, and they probably shaped you. And the reason that people relate so well to you is that you're so authentic in that space. So thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
All right, Nick, do you want to say hi if your internet is up to it, and tell us a little bit about you?
G'day, everybody. I'm hoping that you can hear everything and see everything. Like when other people are talking, it's like jumping in and out. So I'm hoping I can.
We can hear you. I can't see you, but we can hear you.
That's not good, because I've turned my camera on, so I might just turn it off anyway. We never know what's going to happen with Wi-Fi in West Ryde. It's pretty unpredictable. So hi to a lot of you. I'm looking at the people down the bottom of the list. I think I know most of you, and a lot of you have had the privilege of working with you. So that's pretty cool. Adam and Alex are in my little SID 17 group. So hey to you guys, and you're awesome for being here, by the way. My name's Nick, Nick Briley, and I'm an educator from Sydney. I suppose when I think about my story, I kind of different, probably have done it wrong. But I suppose I'm looking at it in terms of 3 things, right? So what came before I was here, right? So my family history, all the trials, successes, and, disappointments of, the family that was here before me. Because what I am today is because of what's come before me, and that's sort of the way I've been taught to look at the way we are, why we are the way we are. And so my grandparents are a huge influence on me, particularly my grandfather. He's turning 100 in a couple of months, but he tells stories about how his mother, he grew up with his mother sweeping a dirt floor, and they were the poorest family in a country out west in New South Wales. So, and of course, my other grandparents who moved 2 doors away from us on my 8th birthday, like the influence that they've had on me and the things that they've taught me, I hope that I've, I suppose, consumed a lot of that myself, and I can share that. So I think about it in what's been passed to me in terms of values, and what of their experience, the people that come before me, what's been intentionally or even unintentionally gifted to me. I suppose the second part is all around why I am what I am and the things that I believe are important in my life now. So I've been an educator for about 10 years, I think. I sort of fell backwards into it. I applied for uni. I was doing another course and I fell backwards in it because it was during the GFC, and I thought, okay, I'm going to need to have a job in my life. What's one thing that like they're never going to not need? It's like teacher. And now I couldn't imagine doing anything different. So that's pretty cool. And so I look in my life now and I break it down into the things that have been given to me or thrust onto me, and the things that I suppose I can't help, but there's also the things that I can choose to change, or the things that I can choose to start in my life, and that will therefore affect me, like, you know, family, relationships, work, and a variety of other experiences. And the third part, I suppose, is what I want for my future and the future of others around me in my life. And I genuinely think that we build our own future based on struggles, I suppose, as well. But I don't think we're forced to do anything. And if we are, we probably shouldn't be. So I look at, you know, what's influenced me in my life and how is this going to affect tomorrow? What am I going to do about that? What am I going to skew? What am I going to change? What values do I need to keep? And what can I share? And the things that aren't important, you know, maybe let those slide. But yeah, so I guess it's past, present, and future. I feel like I've done that wrong, but yeah, thanks.
There is no wrong or right, Nick, so you did it perfectly. And apparently it was my awful internet, not yours, because everybody, all these other people could see you. So sorry to make you turn off your camera. Everyone else was enjoying your beautiful face. And I was just getting I really like your profile picture for what it's worth. So that's good at least. All right. Thank you for sharing. Ben, do you want to share your story?
Yeah, thanks, Kim. I'll jump in. Yeah, I guess I sort of had a pretty similar upbringing to you, Kimberly, that I was really lucky to have a really great sort of traditional Aussie family, I guess, and was very lucky to have 2 great parents that that I'd like to think that they brought me up fairly well. I had a move from Victoria to Sydney when I was about 6 or 7 years old, and I came from a school in Victoria, which, funnily enough, is the school that I actually teach at the moment, which is another story. But I absolutely loved my time in Victoria in the school that I was at, and the school that I went to in Sydney. I actually had a pretty rough sort of time there, sort of trying to fit in. And I actually tell a story to my kids when we have our bullying unit about an experience that I went through that I think really shaped me as a person, and sort of helped sort of build my resilience as a young kid. And I didn't have many friends when I first started at the school that I was at in Sydney. And I remember my dad telling me, "Oh, try and make friends through sport." And he said, "Here's an Aussie rules football. Take it to school and you know, start a game together." And for those that aren't aware of the rivalry between Aussie rules football in Victoria and rugby in New South Wales, there's a bit of a status there, and I found that out pretty quick. Trying to start a game with a couple of boys that I wanted to become friends with, and they ended up taking my ball and booting it on the road. And I remember just sort of looking back at that, I guess, as a teacher, and using that as sort of a story to sort of build resilience and understanding, I guess, differences and whatnot. But yeah, I was lucky enough to move back to Victoria to the same school that I teach at now, and very much value that place, and was a was a big decision, I guess, in becoming a teacher and wanting to go back to that school and sort of impart my knowledge, I guess. Kimberly, I actually have a really funny similar story to you. I actually had a stuff up with my enrollment and applied for the wrong course and ended up becoming a video game designer for 5 years when I actually wanted to become a graphic designer. So we had a bit of an issue with the enrollment, but I went with it and enjoyed a really cool, fun career for about sort of 5 years as a video game designer, working for THQ. Worked on quite a few high-profile games in sort of the Marvel sphere, and also a couple of really popular games for Nintendo, which was really fun, and I guess sort of set up my tech or my e-learning background, I guess, and I draw a lot of experience from my time there. And I guess my sort of a big project that I'm working on at the moment is Game on EDU, which is probably something that I'm looking at sort of creating a keynote for, and that's sort of bringing gamification into education in a more sort of empowering and engaging way. So yeah, I'll finish it there. I've gone over. So yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben. It's so funny because, you know, I've known Ben now for a number of years as well. And I always think of you as like the quintessential Australian male, Ben. And so hearing about like the influence of like the two different footballs, it like totally makes sense. Like you just totally reinforced what but having said that, that was my single story of you. And now you were a games designer, which is something I totally didn't know. And Adam's totally going to hit you up, it looks like, to help with his next unit. So all right, we're going to hear from Shane, I think is the last person who wants to share. So Shane, I'll hand over to you.
It's interesting. Can I just interject and say it's interesting that when Kimberly and I were planning this, we actually had contingencies of what happens if nobody wants to speak. So it's lovely that you all want to share. Thank you.
All right, cool. So me in 3 parts. I'll start with my childhood. So we went a terribly well-off family. I live in regional Queensland, Bundaberg, so we're not a very socially affluent area. So that was a bit of a challenge for my parents. Neither of them really come from terribly well-off families. So I was a fairly intelligent student, and that was a little bit of a struggle for mum and dad. I was the first person in my family to go to university and graduate university, so that was a definite upside for me. I definitely enjoyed that side of it. High school was fairly stereotypical for me. Being the smart student, I was bullied a little bit. I was with a group of friends who was a little bit different from myself, but I guess that helped me to build a bit of character in that space. So at the same time in high school, my uncle worked for IBM, and I found that really interesting, and I think that's where my interest in IT come from, and where I've gone on from there. So that was a little point that made my IT career, I suppose. End of high school, and I guess where I think I've come into education from is there was a couple of teachers that I had at high school that really made an impact for me. So I think education, while I'm not a teacher, I've gravitated towards that area because I feel like helping to nurture the next generation is really important, and having those important role models is something that I can help people with. Uni was a bit of a challenge for me. I started it straight out of high school. I didn't really enjoy that life because all of my friends weren't at university. They were out working, so they had money, and I was a poor uni student. So I actually went out and got a job and deferred and started my study part-time and finished my study part-time, which I think helped me a lot because I ended up with an IT job and have been there for 10 years now. Last 4 years have been great. This is the final part of my story. Last 4 years, I got into a job at education, working for a school, and because of the enjoyment I get out of that job, helping teachers, helping students, I think I'll be in education for a long time coming. So yeah, that's about it for me.
Awesome. Thanks, Shane. And it's so nice for all of us who, I think everyone has been in education a bit longer than you, it sounds like, and we're all total converts to education. So it's nice to hear that you had the same feeling when you first came into it as well. Thank you guys for sharing that. You know, I don't know about you, but I was sort of listening to people's stories thinking, wow, like everybody on this call is so interesting. I want to just like break off into a separate call and just talk to you all in detail and learn more about your stories. And yeah, you know, I think that's the power of a story, and you know, finding that story and finding your voice, and then finding how you make your story relevant to your audience as well, which is what Chris is going to talk about now. That's my nice segue into the next section.
Nice, thanks, Kimberly. I just a couple of things. Notices that I was just listening to people, and one of the things that struck me is something that came through from everybody is a sense of vulnerability. Of people telling really personal stories. And I feel like I know most of you sitting in the bottom of the screen here, some better than others, but all, you know, I think I know all of you at some level. And I learned something from everybody that I didn't know before. And it was because you decided to be vulnerable and tell personal stories. And some of them were really quite brave. So thank you for doing that. I started about 10 years ago, actually a bit longer, about 11 years ago, when blogging and all that sort of stuff sort of first came into the sort of the consciousness. And I started a blog and I started a podcast and I started to just do things to explore that technology. And in the process, accidentally discovered a voice that people, for some reason, listened to and read and responded to. And that was kind of a shock to me. And so I was a little surprised. I think it was about 2009 when I got an email from the organisers of what is now EdTech SA. What was it called before that, Christine? It was called, I forget what it was called, but it was the Educational Technology, thank you, KEGSA, thanks, in South Australia. And they contacted me and they said, we'd love you to do a keynote at our annual event. And I was kind of shocked because I wasn't expecting that, but I was really excited about the idea. And so the idea of getting up and talking to people in this thing, a keynote, was very daunting to me, and I had no idea what to do with it. So I started sort of thinking about how I'd put that together, and I went down to Adelaide and I gave a talk called Learning is a Conversation. And surprisingly, people responded to it really well. And one of the interesting things about when you start to be willing to share, oh, you were there, Christine, awesome. When you start to be willing to share whatever story you have on whatever level, there will be people that resonate with that, and it's really interesting. I think we've all been to events where there's been someone speaking, and you're sitting there thinking, "Oh, this person's not very good," but the person next to you goes, "That was amazing! Oh my God, I got so much out of that." And it doesn't matter. And I know we have people who, you know, I've seen speak that, you know, I think are okay, but other people rave about, and vice versa. So, you know, I'm just saying that because it doesn't matter how you find your voice and how you express yourself, there will be people that connect with your story. And I think that's a really important thing to remember. I'm reading an interesting book at the moment called Weekend Stories. And if you haven't read it, I'd recommend you get it. It's only relatively small. But the key idea in this book, Weekend Stories, is that when you're giving a keynote or presenting an idea, the voice you want to find to do that is your conversational voice. It's as though you're at the pub talking to friends, just telling a story about, this is what I did on the weekend. It's that voice that is the one that people will resonate with. And you've probably been to talks where you've heard someone get up and speak, and they've been very polished and they've been very professional and they've used all the big words, and, you know, they're perfectly structured talks, but for some reason they don't connect with you. And the reason that is because they're just not speaking in the voice that relates to their audience. And so I want to encourage you to think about this idea of telling your stories as though you're just at the pub with friends. These are the weekend stories, standing around a barbecue, just relaying to friends interesting things that are happening in your life. So that's the voice I think you want to find. Now, I've got some notes here that were kindly given to me by Jenny Magira. I hope some of you know Jenny. Jenny is, she's pretty well known in the States. She has been to Australia a couple of times to do things with us. And Jenny gave the closing keynote at ISTE this year. And it was...
Second day keynote. She wasn't closing.
Sorry, second day.
Oh, actually, it was the first official day of the conference.
Oh, okay. For some reason, I thought it was a close. There you go. Yeah. And it was really, really well received. And so when we were planning this session for you guys, I spoke to Jenny, and she's shared a lot of notes with me in the slides I'm about to share with you on some ideas for building the structure around a keynote. So let me just share my screen again. This little button right there. Okay, so this is just some ideas about talk organization. And it's funny, since sort of more formally thinking about how these talks are organized in preparation for talking to you guys today, I've gone back and watched a lot of keynotes. I've watched a lot of TED Talks lately. And I'm thinking about it through this lens of these things I'm about to share with you. And it's interesting. Some people, these are rules that are meant to be broken. Okay. So these are things that, yes, these are great guidelines to run on, but they're equally good rules to break. And sometimes I watched a talk last night by a guy called Z Frank called Are You Human? And he literally just stood there and read a bunch of statements to the audience. Have you ever put a pair of pants on and found a pair of underpants cramped up beside your leg because you didn't know they were in the pants when you put them on? And he's making all these ridiculous statements, and people were sort of laughing about it all because they can relate. Everybody's done all these ridiculous things. And then at the end, he says, this is what makes us human, you know, and it breaks every single rule of what I'm about to show you, but it was still a great talk. So, you know, just bear that in mind as we're going through this, that these are guidelines, they're not rules. Okay, so the first thing, I'll just advance that slide over there. So these are the 6 points I just want to talk to you about. So first of all, so what, who cares, a through line, signposting, storytelling, statistics, and finally a summary. So let's look at these. So first of all, anytime you give a talk, you've got to build a case for so what, who cares. You have to do something that grabs your audience's attention, and the first 2 minutes are pretty critical. Now, I say 2 minutes. It's obviously that's just an approximate number. It could be less or more. But somewhere in the first 2 minutes, you've got to say something, do something that gets people's attention. Some of you may remember there was a great keynote. Bill Gates once gave at a TED Talk where he was talking about malaria, and he took the lid off a jar and released mosquitoes into the auditorium. You know, and that caused such a stir. And no, they didn't have malaria, and they probably weren't even really mosquitoes there. But the act of taking the lid off that jar just grabbed everybody's attention. And suddenly now they were engaged in the talk, and they wanted to know what came next. So that's this idea of building this so what, who cares, okay? And that first 2 minutes is critically important, or that first opening section. So as you're watching some talks, which is what we're going to ask you to do over the next couple of weeks, I want you to pay attention to that. And how do people open their talks? What is the first sentence that comes out of their mouth? How do they grab your attention to start with? So just think about that. The second thing is a really important concept called through line. And I hadn't actually heard of this term before until Jenny mentioned it to me, but I'm aware of the concept, and you probably are too. A through line is really like a theme. Okay, so as you're hearing someone talk, everyone will develop a theme about what they're talking about. What do you think the theme was in that talk you saw this morning from the lady from Africa? Anyone want to jump in and suggest something? Or not? All right, I'll carry on then. Stereotypes and stories. Yeah, thanks, Alfina. That's stereotypes and stories, bias, Christine says. And I think all those are probably spot on. The other thing to think about a through line is it should be a summary of the presentation that you could give in about 15 words. You should be able to summarize your through line. as the theme, and it should be a simple statement of just a few words. We are all individuals, says Adam. Now, there's a difference between a topic and a through line, and I just want to talk about what that is. So, for example, you might be giving a talk where the topic is mathematics, the new creative art. That might be the title of your talk. That's not the through line, though. The through line, if you're giving a talk about that, and you've probably seen keynotes like this, where the keynote is really just a collection of people giving examples of this, and they'll show a funny video, and they'll show a meme, and they have all this stuff that is kind of thematically related in that it's about maths, but it doesn't connect to each other. It's just a series of things that hop around all over the place. That doesn't make, while it might be on the same kind of topic, it's actually not really a through line. A through line might be something like taking the 5 elements of creative arts and how maths aligns to each of those ones. So it's structuring it rather than just being this shotgun approach where you just throw a bunch of stuff at the audience and hope they can connect the dots. It's your job to connect the dots for the audience. Another example might be, you might say the topic is our littlest learners can be the biggest change agents. That's a great idea for a topic. And again, it's really easy to go onto the internet and find a bunch of cute kid videos and some memes about learners and maybe some statistics about how many kids learn this or that. And you can throw all that together and call it a keynote, but it won't really flow in a way that it's do. What you need is a through line. So you might do something like comparing 3 historical change agents to young learners. So you might pick, I don't know, Martin Luther King or Steve Jobs or, Bob Hawke or whoever you want to pick from history and talk about how they related as a young learner. That might be a better approach to doing it rather than just showing a bunch of stuff about young learners. And there's another example there. 4 stories of young learners as change agents and why their age allowed them to be successful. That might be another approach to that topic using a different kind of through line. But no matter how you do it, the through line should connect your ideas in a way that makes sense. And what you're really doing when you're telling that story, there's another example there, everyone can innovate. And again, we've got examples where you can just throw a bunch of random stuff up there, or here's a through line here. The ancient Polynesians were adventurers but had resistant sailors in their community. Here are 7 ways to take learnings from this culture and apply to modern educators. So we're trying to tie the ideas together rather than just have a bunch of stuff. Does that make sense? Now, and again,
do you want to just pause maybe for a second, Chris,
yes,
just in case there's any questions? Because your wait time before was definitely not sufficient because everyone started chiming in as soon as you started talking again.
Oh, I thought people would unmute their mic and just talk. I wasn't expecting text, but that's okay.
Just in case anyone wanted any questions, comments.
Yeah, feel free to unmute your mic, guys, and comment if you would like to. And one of the things that I think, as you're going to watch more talks over the next little while is, now that conscious thought there is about the through line. I want you to think about how that connects. And as you're watching talks, look for the through line. Look for what's connecting all these dots together. Thinking back to the danger of a single story video we watched earlier.
Chris, can I jump in with a question?
Yeah, please, Ben.
Just a fairly new concept for me, the through line. Is there any other sort of, I guess, reading or videos to watch to sort of better understand that?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, Jenny Magira is working on a project at the moment with TED. EdTechTeam is working on a partnership with TED Ed, which is a sort of the education section of the TED conference. And we've been given access to some pre-release videos that go into a lot of these concepts. There is on the front page of the stream in the classroom, there's an NDA I need you all to sign before I can release those. And you do need to not share them with people and not talk about them outside of this group. But yeah, we've got some excellent resources from TED that goes through a whole bunch of examples on all of these concepts. Hope that helps. Cool. So the next concept I just want to mention is a thing called signposting. Good speakers do this all the time. I've stuck on, if you go to the About page on our classroom, you'll notice there is some sample videos that we've put in there. The one I want to draw your attention to is I think one of the best talks I've ever heard, and that's Steve Jobs' address at the Stanford commencement. I think it was 20 2012, where he spoke to the students starting at Stanford that year. And it's a good talk to watch because it actually embodies every one of these points I'm going to tell you here really, really well. And one of them is signposting. And in it, Steve Jobs starts by saying, I'm going to simply tell you 3 stories from my life. And then he says, the first story is, and he goes on and explains his story. And once he's done that, then he moves on. He says, there's a long pause. And he says, the second story is, and then he explains that story. And it's really clear that you know when one story is finishing and the next story is starting. And it uses this technique called signposting. Now, verbally, signposting is when a speaker says things like, I am now going to tell you my second story, or they might hold up their 2 fingers in the air and say the second thing. But you know when you're changing gears, okay? You know when one part of this talk is wrapping up and the next part is starting and how they tie together. And so this idea of signposting. Now, visually, you know, signposting is saying, all right, I want you to pay attention now. We're about to do something. And then you tell your story or say your thing or do your activity or share a statistic. And then you might go through again. Here's another thing I need you to know. And you're literally guiding the audience through the key points that you need them to pay attention to. You're pointing them out, calling them out. Now, visually, if you look at a bunch of slides, you might notice in this little sample here, those slides that are highlighted there in red, visually, they're different to the other slides in that gray background. So when you get to that first chapter 1 slide there and it's gray, you know you're in the first part of this story. And then as you go through and there's some slides to explain a concept, and then you get to the one that says chapter 2. So visually even, you can call out these signposts in your story. So we do it verbally, we do it visually, in order to just let our audience know where we are in the talk and when we're changing and the bits they need to pay attention to. And again, I will pause there and just see if anyone has any comments or thoughts about that idea. Feel free to unmute or type in the chat.
There's a fantastic TED Talk by a New Zealand film director called Taika Waititi from about 2010, I think. And it's interesting they mentioned this as something important at the start of the talk. It's sort of like half joke, half serious, but he comes up with a list of 10 things. Like it's like a tick. Like this is what I'm going to cover in my talk. Tick, tick, tick. And like the first one's like, I'll tell a joke. And the second one, I'll tell you about my life. So, and I thought that was really, really good. And any thoughts I've ever had about doing a talk, I thought that's such a good idea because exactly for the reasons you're saying. Like I know when it's going to be coming to an end, and I know when I probably should be engaged, and probably when I, you know, it's good for my mind when I'm listening. I suppose that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, thanks, Nick.
It's good. I might put a link to it.
The other thing about it too, about signposting, is it gives the audience an idea about where they are in the scheme of things. So, you know, we've all sat in talks where, you know, you think, oh, is this never going to end? Like if it's signposted well and the person has said, you know, there are 3 things I want to talk to you about today, and you know you're up to the end of number 2, you kind of know where you are in the talk, right? So that's a good thing for audience to have.
I was just going to add to the slides. So those slides that Chris had up from Jenny's ISTE preparation keynote, and she talked about how she actually used colours, and I don't think you can really see it on this, but she used colours for each of the different components and segments as well. So not just when like flagging, hey, this is my next major point. Like she had certain colours that she used in I think she said like the top banner or in the font, something like that, which actually signaled like that colour represented one of her key ideas. So she used colour throughout, as well as having like the different major segments.
Yeah,
in there.
I've actually got a slide coming up too where there's you'll see it when you get there, but there's a slide about how Jenny prepared for that keynote, which I think you'll find intriguing. The next concept is that of storytelling. One of my favorite storytelling videos, and I'm not going to share it with you in the chat because it's got a lot of language in it that's probably a bit rude, but is Jim Jeffries talking about gun control in the US. And now he's a comedian doing a comedy sketch, but he tells it as a story, and he connects all these brilliant ideas together in the form of a story, and people are laughing because it's funny, but it weaves this idea of telling a story. Now, every great talk has stories, and there's a really key idea I want to sort of point you to, and it comes from this book called Switch by Chip and Dan Heath. I'm not sure if you've ever read this or not, but it has some great ideas in it. And in this book, they talk about the elephant, the rider, and the path. In fact, I reread this last night, and they really only talk about the elephant and the rider, but I think Jenny added the bit about the path. So any talk, really, you're talking about, think about it like this. First of all, you've got the path. You've got your main idea or your theme, okay? So you've got, there's a certain path this elephant is walking along. So it doesn't just wander through the jungle recklessly, you know, going anywhere. It tries to stick more or less to the theme or the path that your talk is about, okay? So it stays on track. But within that sort of pathway, you've got two forces at play here. One is the rider, and the rider is this sense of a rational argument and logical reasoning, and the rider sits up there on top of the elephant and knows which way they want to go, and they you know, they're trying to point the elephant in the right direction. Below them is this elephant, and the elephant is like the emotion or the heart of your talk. So as you're giving your talk, think about it like the relating to your audience is like you being a rider on top of an elephant. You can use logic and arguments, and you can quote statistics, and you can be as well reasoned as you like to try and persuade your audience to whatever point of view it is you're trying to persuade them to. And every good talk should try and persuade an audience towards something, right? And you can use logic and reasoning to do that, right? Or you can persuade based on emotion and heart. And the analogy of the elephant and the rider is, you know, ultimately the rider might have all the good intentions of directing the elephant in the right direction, but ultimately the elephant's a lot bigger and heavier, and if there's a dispute between the rider and the elephant wins, okay? And it's like that with your audience. You can, yes, thank you, Ben, exactly. People won't remember what you say, but they'll remember how you made them feel. It's exactly the kind of idea going on here. You can direct the elephant as with your logical part of your argument, but ultimately the people will connect with the emotion and the heart of what you're doing. And it's a good idea to let that happen. And so think about that in terms of, as you're telling your stories, it's not just a bunch of facts. It's about making people feel a certain way because of those facts or that information. So that's a very important concept. Andy Craig and Dave Newman, who wrote that book, wrote the best speeches are sometimes 5 or 6 stories linked by a common thread or theme. And there's a lot of truth to that. So that's from the book Weekend Stories. Okay, and Jenny rephrased that to say the best speeches are sometimes 5 or 6 stories linked by a common thread or through line, okay, which is really the same as the theme. The second last thing is statistics. While the elephant is obviously the thing that will probably win the hearts and minds of most of your audience, there are still going to be people in the rooms that you're talking to who do want some statistics and some facts or some quotes. So don't be afraid to sprinkle in some numbers where they're relevant, but just don't go overboard on it. It's not going to be logic that wins the persuasion. It's going to be the emotion, but you know, you can back up that with statistics or with quotes or facts. Okay. And finally, the thing, and you've seen this happen in any good comedy sketch or you know, most TV shows do it, or any good talk does it, is at the end, you bring it back to where you started. So you might have started by saying something in the beginning, and the last thing you do then ties back to the way you started. Okay, so the idea of all of your key points, or your final key point at least, should tie back to the beginning. So it creates this sort of well-reasoned talk where, you know, it all links together, all the dots connect. Okay, so those are the 6 things I want you to take away from structuring a talk. The so what, who cares? Got to get someone to think about, you know, getting their attention. Then there's the really important concept of the through line, the signposting of that through line, so that we divide it up in ways that the audience can sort of make sense of. The storytelling is really important, and using emotions to wrap that up. Then, of course, you know, don't be afraid to use some statistics or quotes if necessary, and then wrap it up again at the beginning. So it's that old idea of, you know, tell them what you're going to say, then tell them what you said. Okay, so that's I will wrap it up there, and I'll stop. What do we got? Oh yeah, no, I wanted to show you this. This is Jenny. When Jenny was preparing her keynote for ISTE, this is how she started preparing it. So she was jotting down a whole bunch of notes and ideas about how she wanted to structure the talk. and I don't remember what colors were what, but I remember each one of those colors, the pink, the blue, and the yellow, were different aspects of the story. Kimberly, do you remember which was which? One was facts and statistics. Another one was.
I feel like the blue might have been the through line or something.
Yeah.
And yeah. No, I don't remember what color she said was what.
Yeah. And again, the planning process is going to be different for everybody, but you can see what she's doing here is we said before, the through line is not just a random collection of stuff that you just simply throw at an audience. But in planning for this talk, you can see that Jenny was having an idea about something, and so she'd make a post-it note about it, and she'd stick it in there because she knew that somewhere that was the thing she wanted to include. But there needed to be then some structure on it. And what she ended up with was this. I think this is a lovely photo here. This is her talk from beginning to end, and you can see all of those key points. And all of the ideas is scattered into this through line that runs down the top line of pages and then along the second line of pages, so that everything connected. It wasn't just a random collection of stuff. All of those ideas ended up somewhere, and some of them were discarded, and probably along the way, extra ones were added to fill in the gaps. But that's, I think, a nice insight into that creative process.
And Jenny talked about when she was talking with us around this, how the order of those post-it notes changed so many times leading up to it. And she said she ordered it, and then she would actually do the keynote. So she actually would present the keynote, and record herself. And then she realized that, she just, something didn't quite flow properly. And so she went back to those post-it notes and physically moved things around until she sort of felt like she got to the point where she was happy with it. And we'll put the link, I just looked, it's not in, we'll add the link to her keynote if you're interested in seeing it in the videos on that About page in Classroom too.
Yeah. Sorry, I thought I'd done that, but I must not have. All right, so feel free to unmute, and if anyone wants to have any conversation about any of those ideas, ask questions, make statements, now would be a good time. Shane left a comment in there too, saying he liked how in that Stanford speech by Steve Jobs, he ends with the punchline, "Stay hungry, stay foolish." Is that similar to a summary? Yeah, I'm thinking, Shane, the idea of a summary would be, yes, to tie those back. And I remember in that talk, everything ultimately came, but the reason he told the three stories was because they were different aspects of his life that he felt were important and influential. But each of them taught him lessons about life that came together in some way to make him the person and to help him achieve the things that he did with Apple. And so his idea in that was, it's all about connecting the dots. It's about going through life and having things happen to you that you don't understand at the time. But in hindsight, when you look back, they all happened for a reason, or because they made sense at some point. The dots connected. And so, yeah, he did sum it up with that, "Stay hungry, stay foolish," which was a nice.
Yeah, so I guess my question was, like, do you have a summary? And then, because I think that was even, I haven't watched it for a little while, that was literally his last words. Is that, like, that's good and punchy? Is that what you sort of aim for in a keynote?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And my recollection is that he tied that together because there was in San Francisco, when he was growing up, there was a thing called the Whole Earth Catalog, and it was a printed publication. It was like a printed version of the internet before the internet was a thing. And on the last page of the last cover of the last edition, that's how that finished. It said, "Stay foolish, stay hungry," which is how he used it in that talk. But again, the reference to the Whole Earth Catalog was in relation to a whole bunch of stuff that came through in the story as well about connecting dots. So yes, it's absolutely tying the whole thing together. And, like I said, these are guidelines, not rules. I've seen plenty of talks where you go, wow, there wasn't a lot of, the guy didn't use statistics, or, there was, the through line wasn't obvious, or whatever. And they're still interesting talks. But I think for us, as people who are trying to develop our voice and develop a sense of being able to give a keynote, that's probably a pretty good set of guidelines to sort of bear in mind as you're structuring things.
And also in this next week, Molly is going to, she said she's going to share a short video around some of the processes that she went through, because she's worked in some very different spaces to the way Jenny has. And she actually has a very different process for the way she sort of thinks about structuring her keynote. So we thought it would be really good to capture two quite different approaches to it. And, you know, Chris and I, when we were planning this, talked around this idea of like, there's actually a good chance they're going to slightly contradict one another, but we actually think that's okay, because you know, every single one of you are going to be so different in the way that you want to approach this, that seeing quite divergent ideas we actually think is can be quite powerful.
Yeah.
So that'll be shared in the classroom, which Chris will talk more about in a little bit. So.
Yeah. I know, you know, I've done keynotes at our events numbers of times now, and one of the interesting things about especially doing work with EdTechTeam is because we move our events around a lot, you know, we can reuse the same keynote multiple times with different audiences, and it's a really interesting thing to give the same talk multiple times and refine it and sort of go, well, that bit didn't work, but hey, they all laughed at that bit, I should do something on that. And you actually refine a talk over time until you get what feels like a much better, and you look back at how you started and you go, oh, it was so awful when I started that, but I feel like it's much better now. So yeah, it's one of these things you improve with practice, definitely. I'm mindful of the time. We've got about 10 minutes left, so we're more or less on time. Let me just tell you how we would like the rest of this to play out. So I'm going to put an activity in Classroom for you to do over the next week. We're going to make it due. It's like homework. We're going to make it due next week. Okay. Essentially, we're going to ask you to find and watch a talk that inspires you. So go into the TED Talks or the Big Think Talks, or wherever you want to find a talk from. It can be anything at all. It doesn't have to be TED. But we'd like you to find a talk that inspires you in some way, something that you would hold up and say, this is a good example of a talk. This is a good example of a keynote. It doesn't have to be long. And then we're going to ask you to use a tool called Video Notes. And I'm guessing a lot of you know what that is. If you don't, we'll make sure we explain it. But Video Notes is a way you can watch a video while you take notes on the side. And every time you take some notes, it will timestamp that part of the talk so you can go back to it easily. So when you spot someone doing a signpost, make a note about it. This was a signpost point. If you make a note about someone, you know, using vulnerability in their story, you might want to make a note about that, and then you can go back to it and revisit that later. So we'd like you to watch a talk that inspires you. We'd like you to make some notes about it using Video Notes, and actually try and pull out and identify some of these 6 points: the so what, who cares, the through line, signposting, storytelling, statistics, and summary, and just identify those structural elements. And then just to add your own voice to it, just to leave a short Flipgrid response to that story as well, and just tell us why you think it's a good example of a story and what it was about that really resonated with you. So that's your homework between now and next week. I hope you don't mind us setting you some homework. None of this is compulsory, so, you know, but we'd love it if you participated fully, obviously.
And also, when nobody is expected, well, we're all different, but the procrastinators in the room, Lorinda, we'll leave this to the last minute, and you don't have to be super detailed. So use Video Notes just as much as anything. It's just to, you know, to have a look at trying to really identify some of those key things. Like you don't have to write comments on the entire thing at all. So. Yeah.
Yeah, and
as you see fit.
All of this is for your own benefit only. I mean, we're not going to be marking it or, you know, looking at any of it. You're welcome to share it with us if you want some feedback, if you want to ask some questions or get some advice or whatever. We're more than welcome to do that, and we will definitely try and help you with that. But like I say, it's not compulsory, and you're doing it for your benefit, not ours. But that's what we'd like you to do. Now, to help support you to do that during this week, Molly, as Kimberly mentioned, has offered to make a short video that just talks about her process of working on developing a keynote and how she structures things, and it might be another point of view for you to experience. And we'll also release those TED Ed talks as well that have some quite detailed instructional kind of videos that talk about some of these key concepts. And again, watch as many or as few as you like, but they're there for your benefit if you would like them. And I think that just about wraps us up for today.
Do you want to just sort of talk a little bit beyond that, Chris? So over the next couple of weeks?
Sure, that would be a good idea. I should signpost that, huh?
Yeah, let's signpost what's happening, and then we can summarize back to what we started with, which is the point of this and what we want people to achieve.
So it is all in the agenda, which is linked on the front page of the classroom there. This week coming up, March 5, is we're going to spend this week talking about the planning process. And like I said, you'll get that video from Molly. You'll get some other links from TED talking about the planning process. The week after that, starting March the 12th, that week we're going to focus on stage presence and voice. And we've enlisted the services of Jim Sill to talk about that. And Jim's going to give you some thoughts about how to tell a story and how to relate to your audience, how to use your voice, when you should bring your voice up, when you should bring your voice down, when you should draw your audience in. Like, you can use a voice in all sorts of ways. Jim's a master at that, so he'll share some ideas about that. And also stage presence, walking around the stage. When should you stand still? When should you move around? Those kinds of ideas. I'm sure we'll learn a lot from that as well. And your homework for that week is going to be to tell us a short story in 2 minutes using Flipgrid, paying particular attention to things like your voice and gestures. Okay, so that's that week's homework. The week starting March 19, I've asked Ken Shelton to come and create a short video for you on visual literacy and basic design principles. You notice we haven't really talked about slides or visuals yet. They are obviously important for most of the time, but you should be able to tell a good story without any visuals. But obviously you will need to at some point. So Ken's going to give us some thoughts about visual design, which is his one of his many strong points about designing slides visually. And the story you tell the previous week, the 2-minute story, we're going to ask you to design some visuals to support that story, okay, to build on that. Then we're going to give you a bit of a break for a while. On April 6th, we're going to ask you to go away. Between then and April 6th, we're going to ask you to go away, develop a short story, a short presentation. I said 10 minutes. Kimberly said 5 minutes, so we said 5 to 10 minutes, something like that, to tell a story which could be the start of your keynote, right? We want you to just develop something that is a nice little package that builds on these ideas and shows us how much you've learned. And you're going to submit that via video. We can talk about that as it gets closer to the date. And then once they're submitted, we'll all get a chance to have a look at each other, leave some feedback. And I thought we'd get back together in another actual hangout like this on May the 12th for a final session, a wrap up and evaluation. You can maybe share some of the things you've learned, whether it was valuable, that kind of thing. So that's the plan, guys. We've only got this live session today and then the live session again at the end. And the rest is all going to be done via Classroom and us sending you resources and you hopefully working through them. And I do hope you get a lot out of it.
I'm sure others are thinking the same thing, but I'm just feeling so grateful for what you've put into this and how you've crafted this learning experience that just models the best practice today. We have this choice and ownership and voice, and it's real. And so thank you so much for doing what you've done today and equipping us to be able to take our next steps. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Christine. I really appreciate that. We used to refer to the people we worked with at EdTechTeam, the people that aren't employees like Kimberly and I, but the rest of you guys who do such amazing work with us, we used to refer to you as contractors because that's the term we inherited from the US, where that's what they use there. And I said to Kimberly recently, I hate that word contractors. It's such a cold, heartless, businessy word, and I don't think of you guys as contractors, and that's why we've changed the language to our extended team. And we really do think of you guys like our extended team, where people, if we were a bigger company and had lots of payroll, we'd love to just employ you all to work with us all the time, but we're just not at that point. But we do consider you our extended team, and we love working with you. So we love doing anything we can do to add value to what you do, and of course in the process I know you add value to what we do, so everybody wins.
And I just want to finally acknowledge, I don't think we really sort of half did at the start, but we did have in the slides that Chris has been working off, we literally totally inherited them from, mostly from Jenny, but Jenny put together this team, Jenny, Ken, Monica, and they worked with a lady called Sarah Thomas, and all of them are at the start of our slide deck, and they actually did a 2-day thing called our Voice Academy in the Flipgrid offices, head office in Minnesota, and it was really about empowering educators of colour in the US to develop themselves. And Jenny is a very generous person, and she literally was like, "Yeah, here's everything that that we did," and you know, Chris has obviously put some work into making it regionalized for us, but I just wanted to acknowledge that we're very grateful that they started a lot of this for us as well. So thanks to everyone. As Chris said, we love having you guys around, and you know, this is an interesting learning experience for us as well, and hopefully we'll all get something out of it, and I look forward to watching everybody's videos and watching everybody grow, and please feel free to reach out at any point where, you know, we don't really, well, Chris never sleeps. Well, Chris sleeps, Chris goes to bed in the early hours of the morning when I get up. So pretty much between the two of us, one of us is awake. So yeah, always happy to chat and help too.
Mm-hmm. All right. And with that, I will hit the stop broadcast button. And I think we stuck exactly to time. I'm impressed. See you all later.
See you guys. Thank you. Bye.